I know many of us grew up in predominantly white communities, so I'm not too surprised. Well, this situation I've always dreaded happened to me on the first day of my freshman year of high school. At lunch, we rearranged our plastic desks in our classroom and connected them to have lunch together. Nervously, I waited for others to take out their lunch first. The person next to me opened up their lunchbox and pulled out a spoon and fork. Then they opened up their container to reveal rice and adobo. I looked at the person across from me. They have rice and sinigang. Some came back from the cafeteria with spam, rice, and egg. Others had pork siomai and longganisa. Finally, I pulled out my Ziploc bag with my favorite lunch items, a chicken salad sandwich and a whole apple on the side. "What are you eating for lunch?" someone asked. "A sandwich." "That's all you're having for lunch?" someone else chimed in. "You're eating a whole apple? That's so American." If you couldn't already tell, this was my first day of high school in the Philippines. But before I move on, let me rewind a bit to explain how we got here. I was born in Union, New Jersey, to two Filipino immigrant parents. I grew up pretty comfortably and went to public school, where there were maybe 4 other Filipino students total, one being my younger brother, and the other being Gabe Kerscoso, shout out. I was somewhat exposed to my Filipino culture, but I grew up very American. We spoke English at home. My mom mostly cooked American food, including my favorite chicken salad sandwich, made from leftover Costco rotisserie chicken, a hallmark of American culture. Once a month, we'd go to Filipino mass, where there'd be food and line dancing after. We'd also have Filipino food at family parties, where my lolo or my grandpa cooked. But that was pretty much it. Now, middle school tends to be a pretty rough period of time in our childhood when we start to form our friend groups and figure out who we are and what we want to be. Social media also became a thing at this time, and suddenly everything started to feel like a popularity contest. I was very aware that I was different from the majority and so desperately wanted to fit in. So I rejected my Filipino culture, never brought Filipino food to school, and I didn't want to be grouped in with the quiet, smart Asian kids, even though I was a quiet, smart Asian kid. Who was I kidding? I played the piano and the flute. I often felt self-conscious about being seen in public with my entirely Asian friend group and would take every opportunity to hang out with other groups who were, you guessed it, white. Toward the end of middle school, I started to feel like I found my place. I got into our middle school jazz band, which I loved. I was getting good at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which I had been training for a while, and I felt like I was branching out of my main friend group at school. Then my parents told us we were moving to the Philippines. When we asked why, they could never give us a clear-cut answer. It will only be for 1 year, they said. It will be a good experience. I didn't know how to feel. Confused? Angry? Scared? How could we just get up and leave everything we had here? In my head, the Philippines was just a place we visited sometimes for vacation. And even though I was Filipino by blood, the Philippines was still a foreign place to me. What would it even be like to live there? My frustration grew when we started to tell our family and friends about the move. When we got mostly negative reactions, especially from my grandmother, on my mom's side, who was the first of our family to immigrate to the US in hopes of a better life. Everyone's first reaction was, why? I couldn't explain it because I was just as confused as they were. But what was worse was the intention behind the question and the weight of the judgment behind their words. Why would you leave your amazing life in America to live in a third world country? Why would your parents give up the American dream that they worked so hard to achieve? I was conflicted. I wanted to agree with them and ask my parents the same questions, but at the same time, I knew I had no choice and wanted to find ways to view the move in a more positive light. At least I get to start fresh and make new friends, right? But do they even have jazz band or jiu-jitsu at my new school? Spoiler alert, they didn't. Grace Tolosan, Filipino author of The Body Papers, said it best. Immigration is a kind of death. You leave one life for another one with no guarantee of seeing your loved ones or home again. In 2017, I graduated middle school, said goodbye to my friends, and I was on my way to Cebu City, Philippines, 8,524 miles away. What even is this American dream anyway? By dictionary definition, it means having a good job, a family, a nice house, and a lot of money. But is this really how everyone defines success and happiness? When people asked us why, I couldn't explain it. I was just as confused as they were. But it was only years later that I learned the full truth that my parents had been hiding. Technically, we already had achieved the American dream. They had stable jobs, a nice townhouse, financial security, at least on the surface. But my mom was working an incredibly stressful job and struggling with a gambling addiction. My dad had inherited land in the Philippines and wanted to build something of his own and to be closer to his aging mother. They wanted us to reconnect with our culture and experience life beyond the bubble that we'd grown up in. What good is economic success if you're not actually happy, if you don't feel like you belong, and you don't feel like you're pursuing something meaningful? But at 14 years old, I wasn't ready to understand any of that. All I knew was that my life was about to be turned upside down and I had no say in it. It would take me years and a complete transformation to finally understand what they were really searching for. The school I was enrolled in was called the Center for International Education, British School. For some reason, I thought this meant that everyone at the school would be British. Boy, was I wrong. Not only was everyone not British, nobody was even international, including the teachers. I walked into my year 9 class that it consisted of around 25 students, and almost all of them grew up in the Philippines and had been attending this school, which was K-12 for many years. Like anyone moving to a new country, I of course experienced culture shock initially, especially in the classroom. At first, it was the small things I noticed, such as the preference for using pen and correction tape instead of a pencil and eraser. We addressed our teachers as teacher, or shortened to Chur, and their first name, for example, Chur Mike or Chur Ruth, which might be considered rude here in the US. Of course, I was not used to bringing Filipino food to school every day, and my classmates teased me for having an American accent. This was an odd feeling, to say the least. Back in the US, I looked different from the rest, and people saw me as Asian. In the Philippines, I looked like everyone else, but I was known as the American, privileged, out of touch, and with a weird accent. But it was actually kind of refreshing to hear this new perspective. After all these years of feeling like I didn't fit in, here I was with people telling me I was too American. After all, culture doesn't boil down to just your ethnicity. It's about the shared values, habits, and perspectives that you develop over time that are shaped by the environment surrounding you, which in my case was the US. But despite the initial teasing, it turns out my classmates were more curious than anything about my upbringing and warmly welcomed me into their group. I saw this as an opportunity to learn about the different social norms and fully immerse myself into Filipino culture without any shame. I started bringing rice dishes to lunch and rode motorcycle taxis around the city, which is now my favorite mode of transportation. My American accent started to fade, and I learned how to use common slang terms from my friends, and I was finally able to introduce myself the proper way, as Abigail Binaday instead of Binaday. Most importantly, I began to discover sides of myself that I had not seen before. I joined extracurriculars where I got to sing and dance my heart out on stage next to other talented people. I learned that I shouldn't feel ashamed for getting good grades since my classmates all praised me for it. I took on leadership roles on the student council, and through our unique assignments where our whole class had to come together to run a business or produce a rendition of a musical. This was all because I was around people who accepted me for who I was, especially given our shared culture, so I felt comfortable making mistakes along the way to learn and grow. I also felt so much closer to my friends in Cebu than I ever had in the US. Maybe it was because we spent so much time together outside of school, crammed in the back of a pickup truck heading to the beach, talking about life for hours at our favorite coffee shop, or playing games until the sun rose during COVID lockdowns when we couldn't go anywhere else. Or maybe it was because, for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to perform or prove anything. I could just be myself, and that was enough. After the first year, maybe even after only a month or two, I knew I didn't want to go back to the US. I had found something I didn't know I'd been searching for my whole life. A place where I didn't have to choose between being Filipino and being myself. They were the same thing. But I want to be clear, life in the Philippines wasn't some perfect paradise. It was real, and real life is complicated. My parents got divorced after our first year there. COVID hit during my junior year, and the Philippines went into one of the strictest lockdowns in the world for 2 full years. Class was virtual for the rest of my high school, and prom and graduation were both canceled. And my Lola, my grandmother, the one who first brought our family to America, the one everyone said we were betraying by leaving, was diagnosed with lung cancer and passed away a few months later. These were some of the hardest years of my life, And yet somehow, they were also the years that taught me the most important lessons I've ever learned. Living in the Philippines opened my eyes to how differently people experience the world. In the US, so many of our problems come from focusing on what we lack and as we strive for more. More money, more comfort, more control. We're taught that happiness and success is something that you have to achieve and something that you accumulate. But in the Philippines, I saw something completely different. Every morning on my way to school, I looked out the window and to see families searching for their next meal. Kids and elderly knocking on our car window, asking for spare change. Streets lined with makeshift homes that barely survived each typhoon season. I remember one day though, maybe a day or two after a massive typhoon that had ripped through the city, I saw two men repairing a roof of their shack. The metal sheet was bent, the structure was barely holding together, and these guys were drenched in sweat under the brutal sun and lingering humidity. And they were smiling, genuinely and joyfully, helping each other with the little that they had left to give, and even joking around as they worked. This image of resilience stuck with me, because here I was going through my own struggles, and I still had so much compared to them. I had food, shelter, electricity, a phone, an education, a support system of friends who supported me no matter what. Throughout my time in the Philippines, I came to understand that happiness isn't measured by what you have or what you don't have. It's about seeing what you already have and being grateful. Even now, I'll catch myself slipping into old patterns, whether it's complaining about an upcoming exam or getting frustrated over getting caught in the rain, all first world problems, if you will. But I pause and can't help but think, how can I be stressed about studying when thousands of kids would do anything to have access to education? How can I be annoyed over getting soaked in the rain when thousands of Filipinos are currently drowning in their own homes because of the corrupt government officials who stole billions of pesos that were supposed to be used for flood prevention projects? Living through those difficult years, surrounded by people who had it so much harder but remained so much more resilient than me, changed my perspective on the world fundamentally. And honestly, I wouldn't trade that for anything. Not even for the proms or the graduation I missed, because this new sense of gratitude for everything I do have, no matter how small, allows me to go through life happier and push through any hardships that come along the way. Even though I didn't want to leave the Philippines after that first year, I always knew I would eventually come back to the US for college. Not to go back to chasing the American dream, but because I understood my privilege. I had US citizenship and access to opportunities that my classmates in Cebu didn't have. And I couldn't waste that. I wanted to gain the skills and education that might one day allow me to give back to the communities at home that had given me so much. But I never expected that moving back would be harder than leaving in the first place. The goodbye was brutal. I was the only person in my class going to the US for college. My friends threw me a despedida party, a Filipino farewell celebration, and I ugly cried for probably the entire month before my flight back. For the first time in my life, I experienced real homesickness. Not for New Jersey, where I was born, but for Cebu, a place I had resisted moving to just 4 years earlier. And when I got back to the US, I felt lost in a different way than I had in middle school. Back then, I was trying to hide parts of myself. But now I didn't know how to explain who I'd become. Most conversations in freshman year go pretty much the same. What's your name, major, what dorm are you in? But then there was the dreaded question of, where are you from? The conversation usually looked like this. I'm technically from New Jersey, but I lived in the Philippines for high school. Oh, so you're international? No, I was born here. But you lived in the Philippines? Why did you guys move there? And there it was again. The same question that had haunted me before I left. Why? How do you casually explain to another 18-year-old that your family left to pursue something deeper than economic success? That our parents wanted us to experience life outside of the bubble that we had grown up in? I couldn't. So I usually just say something like, my dad had a business opportunity, and change the subject. But every time I gave that service level answer, I felt like I was betraying the truth of what I had experienced. I was doing the same thing I did in middle school, hiding parts of myself because I thought people wouldn't understand. It took me a while to realize that the question itself or the people asking it weren't the problem. My fear of answering it was. The fear of being judged or misunderstood. Because the truth is, I finally did understand why we moved, and more importantly, I understood who I had become because of it. I just had to build up the courage to own it. So I stopped giving the short answer. I started telling people the full story, about the lunch table, about the resilience and joy I witnessed, about the smallest differences that made our culture so rich and unique. And I made a promise to never reject my culture again. In middle school, I hid everything that made me Filipino because I so desperately wanted to fit in. Now I wanted to do the opposite, to share our culture openly and unapologetically. This is what led me to join Barkada, Northeastern's Filipino student organization, and eventually serve on the executive board. I was hesitant at first. Most members were Filipino American, and from what I could see, the connection to Filipino culture felt very surface level. Food, dance, the part of our culture that are easy and fun to celebrate. But I realized that's exactly why I needed to be there, to share the deeper layers I'd experienced, both positive and negative, to help other Filipino Americans who didn't have the same opportunity to live in the Philippines, like I did, reconnect with their values, the resilience, and the everyday realities that don't always make it into cultural night performances. I even got to proudly share our culture with non-Filipinos, something my middle school self never would have imagined doing. And you know what I discovered? People didn't think I was weird. They leaned in. They were genuinely excited. They shared their own stories of feeling caught between worlds, between cultures, between who they were and who they were becoming. And slowly, I began to build a new home here in Boston. Not by replacing Cebu, but by carrying it with me. I could finally answer that question that followed me for all those years. Why? We moved because the American dream isn't one size fits all. My parents realized that checking all the boxes, stable jobs, nice house, financial security, didn't automatically lead to happiness. They wanted to build something meaningful, to be closer to family, and to give us a chance to understand where we came from. My grandmother immigrated to America so our family could have choices. And we chose to go back to the Philippines, not to reject her sacrifice, but to honor it by actually using the freedom she gave us. The freedom to define success in our own terms. We weren't just moving from one place to another. We were searching for something deeper, for belonging, for gratitude, and for home. And home, I discovered, was never about choosing one place or another, and it's not just about the place you were born into. It's about the people and moments where you can truly be yourself. So before I close, I want to share a video that I made before leaving Cebu. It's not a goodbye, it's a thank you to the place that became my home, to the people who became my family, and to the version of myself that I discovered there and learned to love. This is what home really looks like.
So many days I miss you. What did our time for? Just going through pictures, saying
Abby's never leaving because we're gonna kill her before she leaves.
No!
So she'll be here with us forever.
lately I've been thinking of all memories, all the laughs we shared, and all the tears. Hope you know that I'm forever grateful, all the time you shared, staying by my side. Thank you for the love. I gotta say, still many days when I feel alone. So I pray to God, and then He reminds me I'm not alone. He gave me you. Oh, it's just so easy to be sentimental. Lately I've been thinking of my memories, all the laughs we shared, and all the tears we cried. Oh, you know that I'm forever grateful, all the time you shared, staying by my side. Thank you for the love. And when I find myself in pieces on the ground, you pick me up and turn me back around. And any day could be our last, so we'll be holding on to all the love we found. Lately I've been thinking of our memories, all the laughs we shared, all the things we found. Hope you know that I'm forever grateful, all the time you shared, staying by my side. Thank you for the love. Where would I be without you? Thank you for the love.
Many of us grew up balancing two or more worlds. One where we packed rice for lunch, and another where we learned to hide it. And for so long, I thought I had to choose. That belonging meant picking a side, Filipino or American. But belonging isn't about choosing one side. It's about weaving all parts of you together to create something that is uniquely and entirely your own, and sharing that story with the world. The rice in my chicken salad sandwich, the American accent in the PAACx slang, New Jersey and Cebu, every complicated, messy, beautiful part. We all have the power to craft our true identity, find happiness through gratitude, and define our own success. And you don't need to move halfway across the world to discover that. All it starts with is giving yourself the permission to embrace everything that you are and everything that you already have. That's when you find your people, and that's when you find your home. Thank you.